being inspirational is not just reserved for the extraordinary. It is something that each and every one of us has within ourselves, and it is our responsibility to help other women discover the talents and the abilities that lie within. This is not just on a global scale that I'm asking, but it's here in Niagara as well. Today, I'd like to share some thoughts on how we can inspire others in our everyday lives through growth, leadership, and the simple act of doing something different. In 1998, when Sebastian Serwan and I co-founded Pure Hand Knit, we set out trying to find a place to knit my sweater designs, and we toured several areas, including South America, and we settled in on Chiang Mai, Thailand, a beautiful and cultural city about 700 kilometers north of Bangkok in the mountains. In Thailand, women grew up learning the traditional handicraft of weaving, crocheting, and knitting, so it was a perfect and great fit for the type of stuff I was trying to produce. At that point, the vision of the company was very small and simple, really, to get a few sweaters knit and bring them back to North America and see if they would sell. I was in my mid-20s at the time and had the wonderful idealism that comes along with being a recent university graduate. However, as the company evolved, I realized there was a right way of doing business from someone from the Western developed world, even if we were very far from home. In the 15 years since we opened the doors in Chiang Mai, we have now become one of the area's largest employers. A little over a year ago, we had the great fortune of having Christina Reynolds, the editor-at-large of Elle Canada magazine, visit our factory. She spent 4 days and every living and breathing waking moment in our factory with us. And this meant that I spent nearly 4 days answering hundreds of questions personally. I also sat in on dozens and dozens of interviews Christina had with a cross-section of our staff. This included knitters, sewers, production managers, and sourcing managers. This was really the first time I had taken time to reflect on the impact the business had had over the last decade and a half. I realized several things. First was that, as Christina put it, I am known as a mother hen to nearly 6,000 women in northern Thailand. Yay! And this is where I wasn't supposed to have tears. The enormity of that responsibility is something that I don't take lightly, and to be honest, on days like this, it's a little overwhelming some days. As I watched these wonderful women being interviewed, I was amazed by the humbleness and the extraordinary bunch of these women that had been with us from the beginning, or like women like Nung Luck. Nung Luck, like most of our knitters who knit the Pure Hand Knit brand, come from a farming background. Many have little or no education. As Christina and the translator began to ask them questions, I was struck by how reserved and modest they were about the integral roles they'd had in the success of the company. As I tried to get them to talk about how far they'd come in business personally, especially with such little education, then I wanted them to speak about how hard they'd worked over the years, which had led to many of their achievements. Eventually, Nung Luck and the other women talked about the business as their family and the importance of loving what they do and carrying on the cultural traditions of knitting. Nung Luck told Christina she used to work on her family's rice farm and as a general laborer, but now, as one of our main knitting leaders, she had great responsibility. She has been able to train and teach others to improve their skills, and as a result, she could afford to send her children to university, making them the first generation of her family to attend. Nung Luck and Umporn are our two top knitting leaders. With just grade 4 educations each, they oversee 800 women knitters. And they come from the really far north of Thailand. When we first started working with them in 1998, they couldn't even open a bank account, without our help, that is. And they were, first of all, just intimidated to go into a bank. And secondly, it was a general known fact that banks really didn't want uneducated Northern Thai women as their customers, to say the least. It has been interesting operating a company in a country where women are not encouraged to even open a bank account in their own name. From a Western perspective, especially at the time of this, again, idyllic university graduate time in my life, this was mind-boggling and frustrating. And it sometimes took creativity and ingenuity to find solutions for situations we would luckily never have to deal with in Canada. So returning to my bank story, so with 14 young Thai women in tow, Sebastian and I, two crazy Canadians in our 20s, went to the bank. And we waited. And there we used my power of negotiation skills, and we convinced the bank manager that in order for us to do business with them, they needed to do business with these women. And after some negotiations, we had the accounts. Today, those 14 women have helped us establish 14 knitting co-ops, which operate of their home-based businesses in their rural villages, all within a few hours of Chiang Mai. We use a formula to establish a set of payments for each sweater style depending on the complexity. This assures that the knitters have no price discrepancies in the different regions. In the beginning, each leader was very secretive and cautious about the pay scale. Trust was always an issue with these crazy Canadians who didn't maybe look so trustworthy in our 20s. It took many meetings and discussions about open pricing for the women to come together and see that they could get more accomplished collectively than if they worked as individuals. This allowed them to feel that we were all on the same team, even when I was halfway around the world for many of them. The company's success could not have been possible without tremendous commitment from these women. One of the things that I'm most impressed about was their willingness to embrace change, especially when they were afraid. At one point, we needed to have the women have fax machines, now this is in 1998, in their homes. So out we go when we buy 14 fax machines. And the idea was that I would fax the patterns and the upgrades from Canada to them. Well, to give you an idea of how technologically advanced Thailand was in the area that we were knitting in 1998, the women in the entire area had a shared party line. This was going to be a challenge to hook up a fax machine to a party line, but with some ingenuity, they figured it out, and voila, we had a fax machine for the whole area. Since then, we've also even asked them to learn email, digital cameras, laptops, and again, huge learning curves that I have lots of stories about, but they all figured it out in the end. These women's willingness to come to the table as partners, about sometimes kicking and screaming, is remarkable. They worked to a solution, and they were very patient when the aches and pains of the growth of the company were happening as well. And they have been an integral part of expanding both brands. Sometimes what even seems small to us, like learning the simple request of learning how to use a fax machine or a digital camera, could be overwhelming. But because it was for the betterment of the business, they accepted the challenge, and for that I'm very grateful. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." His words very much resonate with me and relate to my business and how things have progressed from our humble beginnings. Sometimes you can't just rely on other people to have systems in place and structures in place that you hope to accomplish. You must build your own foundation from the ground up. We started the company with 2 knitters, Nungluk and Angkorn, and have grown to a network of nearly 6,000 people. I feel strongly that the company's growth cannot happen without empowerment and change, and recognizing the change part is part of inspired leadership. One woman who continues to inspire me and others at our company is named Pyrin. She started her career with us earning minimum wage in the shipping department as a pick and pack worker right out of college. Her work ethic, drive, and ambition have developed her into a strong leader. She oversees hundreds of workers and manages our entire shipping and pick-pack department for both of our brands. However, her strengths had to be cultivated and developed. Leadership did not happen overnight. As you all can imagine, Thailand is much different culturally than Canada. Being aware of cultural differences is important when trying to do business in a foreign country. And this is even truer in Thailand than I could ever imagine. About 4 years after being in Thailand, we started to expand the brand Pure Handmade. We needed a new warehouse space, and we had to do a mass hiring to keep up with the demand. At the same time, as a good manager, I was trying to learn to delegate more. I had 2 Thai managers in mind, and they were going to hire new teammates to make the expansion happen, one of whom was Pyrin. With clear job descriptions in hand, the hiring began, and we received many resumes. Managers held interviews, and they successfully hired like crazy. And as luck would have it, some of the new staff were even able to start the next week, funny enough. But then strange things began to happen. Within a week, I could tell that some of the new employees were not a good fit for our team, and especially the jobs that they've been hired for. But before I went to talk to Pyrin and ask what the heck happened, I pulled the resumes of the newly hired women and could see right away that they were not a good fit. So what was going on? For the next few days, I sat in on some more interviews to try to figure out why on earth these people had been hired with the wrong qualifications. Right away, I could see what the problem was. In Thai culture, the notion of face is extremely important. And what that means is that there's no conflict, there's no disagreements, there's no disputes, and they should all be handled with a smile. And without any attempt to blame the other person. Now, these are excellent qualities to possess, but they can be a terrible hindrance if you're trying to hire people by weeding through hundreds of possible candidates. We started talking about how to hold an interview and how to find the best candidate. Very quickly, I realized that a typical Western-style interview would never work in Chiang Mai. And cutting an interview short, even which I might be notorious for, even when you knew the fit was right, not right, would be even worse. We needed to find good people, and we needed to find good people fast. I talked to Pyrin and the other managers for a few days to come up with a good interview process. We even conducted a few practice interviews on each other, and we came up with a Western-Thai hybrid interview, if you will, one that coupled Western processes with Thai traditions. We developed a scoring system. Anyone who scored a 9 out of 10 was someone the managers wanted to hire. And when we rolled out the system, our first interviewee came up, and she looked great, but she scored a 7. In the manager's mind, 7 was still a good review, but then they knew the person was not the perfect fit for the company. And they soon realized that hiring someone who scored a 5 or 7 was going to make their lives more difficult and the jobs more challenging. And once we started hiring workers who scored it at 8 or 9, we immediately saw improvement. Though our ranking system might sound very elementary here today and a small detail, it was vital in the hiring process. It empowered managers like Pyrin because now they were succeeding in their positions and filling the company with great candidates. As a leader, you need to be flexible and you need to trust your intuition. You must admit when you've made mistakes, and you must be willing to find alternatives. By implementing this small change, we sparked a new path forward, helping expand the company and positively influencing all involved. At the time, we also had another breakthrough. It was in the terms of my language. When I wanted an update of how things are going, I would ask Pyrin, is everything good? Is everything good? Like, how are you doing? Are y'all good? Now, if I were to ask you all if everything was good, you would probably, hopefully, tell me honestly. You would say, no, Shannon, the trucks were late, the machines were down, and everybody's cranky. But Pyrin would say, oh yes, Shannon, everything's good. We're all good. So using the words good and bad wasn't going to cut it. In Thai culture, again, just as the notion of face, anything that carries a negative connotation is frowned upon, and it's not addressed. So it took a while, but I could see that staff was clearly struggling with a negative issue or response. I would say, "Are you sure everything's good?" And 90% of the time they would say, "Shannon, I'm not so sure," or "This is not so good." Now, as laughable as that sounds, and my staff from Thorold knows this is my claim to fame of "Are you sure?" It was a major breakthrough because staff and managers felt comfortable saying "not so good" or "not so sure" when addressing conflict and describing the possible candidate or negative situation that needed to be addressed. Today, sometimes, even when I'm in Thailand, they ask me, especially because I'm pregnant, "Are you sure?" When I'm flip-flopping on a decision, which seems to be a little bit more these days. By taking the time to build relationships with those who work at our company, I figured out we needed to amend our corporate language to empower workers like Pyrin so that they could talk about difficult and hard issues that they faced. A decade later, we continue to use this number rating system as well as the good and not so good lingo in our corporate culture. Pyrin and the managers have gone on to hire hundreds and hundreds of people, training many to be great in the art of this good interview and inspiring others to be managers. As you may or may not know, last year was a milestone for me personally as well as in business. Through an amazing 40th birthday celebration, a store opening, a design studio opening, and becoming pregnant with our second child, I read the exceptional book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl is the Chief Operating Officer at Facebook, and if you haven't read the book, I strongly recommend so. It is because of her book that we decided to put together the Shannon Passero Annual Women in Business Grant as a way to lean in and give back. And I never imagined the amazing impact that this idea would have on me. Our recipient, Lori Elstone from Provision Foods, is here today with us. Sorry, Lori, I told you I wouldn't, but I did. She's here today with us, and about 3 weeks after getting the grant and after it was given out, I received a great note from Lori that opened my eyes to the real possibility of what this grant can mean not only to the winner, but the Niagara community at large. Perhaps naively, I thought the two women who were awarded the money would use it to increase their business by advertising, promotion, or building a new website. Maybe they'd stay in touch and we'd see them grow, but I didn't think I would get a letter like I did, like the one Lori sent to me. In it, she explained the first thing that she did with some of the money was raise the wages for her employees, all of whom are women in Niagara, so that they could earn more than minimum wage, thereby bettering their families' lives. I also received a letter from our other winner, who is also here today from Toronto, Alyssa Kernbull from Mini Moosh, saying that she couldn't wait to be able to give back and pay it forward, even if it's on a smaller scale. I am humbled by the possibility of this grant and the power of leaning in and inspiring other women. As a humanitarian, I always strive to do better and encourage the betterment of others. I aspire to approach to do what I do personally and in business in a civilized, enlightened, and compassionate way, because every decision that I make has a ripple effect, which knowingly or unknowingly affects others. Change is growth. When you implement one positive change, you can watch it take root and develop into other positive transformations. Some are immediately noticeable, like the newfound opportunity of opening a bank account for the first time. Others are not so evident and may take years to manifest. But one single change can start a chain reaction. After 15 years of doing business in Chiang Mai, We are now seeing the next generation of the families and how they've been enriched. In Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg talks about the importance of education. Like Sheryl, I was expected to go to university. It wasn't a choice. It was something that you just did. My parents are here. I said that for you, Mom. At university, I learned the art of negotiation and the importance of public speaking. Two invaluable skills I use regularly. In a speech that Sheryl gives to the graduating class of the Bernard College, an all-women's liberal arts school in New York City, she encourages the graduates to have the ambition to lean into your career and run the world, because the world needs you to change it. Women all around the world are counting on you. Investing in people, especially women, has always been a part of my business plan. And education has always been at the forefront of our management strategies. In addition to offering our factory employees access to free English and Thai classes, as well as a hot meal every day, higher educational degrees have also been achieved by some of our members. We have been lucky to see a half a dozen students complete their MBA degrees while working for us. So you know how much effort that takes. As well, 60% of our managers are females, and about 90% on the garment side, which is very atypical for our industry. The women who work for us have options, and options lead to different and better choices. These women now have confidence in a future they never knew could exist before. Sorry. The limitations aren't as daunting, and you have hope for something better. As I began my talk today, I spoke to each and every one of you about how you too can be inspirational. And really, we shouldn't leave it up to politicians, corporate leaders, and celebrities. As we are here today and we reflect on the importance of International Women's Day, I want to challenge you to think of ways you can be inspiring, even if it's simply finding a new way to communicate with each other. This is also one of the reasons that we've partnered locally with the Women in Leadership Business Conference at the end of this month. And I'd like to point out that you can find out more information about this great conference in the back there after I finish speaking. Each of us is responsible for inspiring change in our own way and by our own means. Without change, there is no progress. Roads remain untraveled, goals continue to be unattained. Being an agent of change in my business has changed me personally. Inspiring change can't help but transform you in turn. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.